Let me ask you about something that is breaking today. You've been a big supporter of combating violence against women, the legislation, your initiative against sexual assault on campuses. Here you have the FBI warning the White House, this White House, for months that one of the top advisors in and out of the Oval Office was accused by 2 ex-wives of domestic abuse. How do you explain his access to the President of the United States and the Chief of Staff, frankly, in the last 24 hours, describing as a man of personal integrity?
I can't explain it. It's long past due that he left. I understand he's departed. If you just look at it from the perspective of one thing, the FBI didn't think he should get a security clearance, a permanent security clearance.
They had to know that.
No, and sure they knew that.
They were warned.
And they still did. Look, the culture's changing, thank God, but not fast enough. And the idea that this would happen in the Oval Office. Now, I don't know, I heard in the way I was briefed in the way in that when the President found out about it, he said go. So if that's the case, if the President never knew about it, good for the President.
How could the President not know that one of his closest advisors did not have a top security clearance? What does that say about the President and this White House?
Oh, Andrea. Look, I'm having enormous difficulty understanding how this White House functions and who's on first, who's on second, and who's pitching, who's catching. I mean, it really is confusing. All I know is that the result of the sort of, it seems like, controlled chaos is damaging us internationally, it's damaging us domestically, and I just don't, I can't quite understand how they can't get their arms around just the functioning, the day-to-day functioning of the White House.
Well, let me ask you, take you back to what you said just the other day about whether the President should sit down for an interview with Robert Mueller. And you said that your advice, you're a lawyer, your advice would be that he should not, because, to quote you, he has some difficulty with precision. What do you mean by that?
Well, you know, there have been so many misstatements, deliberate misstatements. And you look at him and wonder, what in the heck is he talking about? From the first day saying the largest crowd ever at inauguration to talking about things that are just simply not true. But it's almost like it's a, it's been dumbed down so much, it's almost like it doesn't matter. But he says
but
things.
But it does matter because he's the President of the United States.
It matters immensely. It matters immensely. But it's just, I find him just not credible in the things he says.
Do you mean that he's a liar?
Look, I'm not going to sit and call the President of the United States a liar. I can say, I'll use my term. He does not tell the truth. He's not accurate in much of what he says.
So, to take it further, if he does not agree to an interview, does that mean he's above the law?
No, he can be subpoenaed. He can, look, I was literally answering the question, if I were his lawyer, what would I recommend? Now, I think he should go before the council. He says he wants to do it. Do it. Go ahead. But I was answering a literal question, and I would put on my hat as a lawyer. Were I his lawyer, would I let him go before the council and answer questions? I would be very, very concerned. And you can tell his whole team is concerned about what he says. I mean, you have the Chief of Staff a long time ago allegedly trying to stop his tweeting. And it's not just his tweeting, it's an inaccurate tweeting. I mean, so it's, he's like a loose cannon. And I don't, but he should, a president should be prepared to answer the questions about one of the most serious security breaches that's occurred in American history, Russia attempting to affect and impact on the American electoral process. They're doing it, as you know, because you're one of the most leading foreign policy correspondents. They're doing it in Europe on a regular basis.
Mexico?
Mexico, they're doing it all, and it is, they're trying to deconstruct a liberal world order. They're trying to deconstruct the notion of freedom and democracy. They're trying to deconstruct all those things that were built up after World War II that were designed to diminish the prospect of the abuse of power by a single nation or by an individual. And they're being, and I just can't fathom. I can't fathom why the president, just as a patriotic American, let alone as president, would not be looking for every single bit of data and evidence that would show what they were doing and what they're attempting to continue to attempt to do.
Well, let me just button down whether he should submit to an interview or not.
Obviously
if
he
he
should.
doesn't, can the President of the United States take the fifth and not suffer grievous political harm? Or can this president get away with taking the fifth?
You know, if the president took the fifth, he is by definition, in my view, abdicating the responsibility of the presidency of the United States. The idea that the President of the United States says, I take the fifth that I might incriminate myself in something that is this consequence, you know, that to me, it's constitutionally permissible as an individual. It is abhorrent notion as a sitting President of the United States of America.
Now, you talked about the Russian interference. The fact is, both the CIA director and the Secretary of State have said it's still going on. The Secretary of State said, we can't stop them between now and the midterms. Is that because this White House has not moved aggressively?
Absolutely. Look, here's my understanding, and I don't know. I don't have access to classified information anymore. I don't get briefed every morning by the agency, as I did for 8 years. What we do know is their attempts are continuing. What we do know, what I'm told, is there has not been an interagency, bringing all the relevant agencies together in one time, in one meeting, to focus on how do we stop them. To the best of my knowledge, there's not even been an interagency meeting to do something about this.
The Foreign Relations Committee Democratic report said that that's negligence.
It is negligence. It's absolutely negligence. I mean, here you're talking about the Secretary of State saying, we know they're still doing this and we can't stop them. Well, what have you done? Have you brought together the CIA, the DIA? Have you brought together all the agencies in the federal government that have the capacity, at least, to be able to stop and thwart what they're doing? Haven't even done that.
Why do you think this president is so reluctant to take on Vladimir Putin?
Look, you know, I want to give every American, including the president, the benefit of the doubt, but I can't fathom any reason other than he is concerned of what Putin might say or do, or what information he may or may not have. But look, unrelated to the whole issue of whether or not there's collusion, separate and apart from all that, it's necessary for us to stem this problem. It's necessary for us to corral the Russians. I just wrote a major piece in Foreign Affairs talking about, and you know what the first call I got? I got a call from leading European leader, former prime minister, wanting to put together another group of 6 or 7 sitting and non-sitting prime ministers representing the panoply of left to right in Europe to set up an international commission on Russian interference in Europe after I wrote the article. I mean, what has to be done? What has to be done to convince these guys that they're being derelict in their duty and they are, in fact, jeopardizing American security?
Is it appropriate for the president to be attacking the FBI, as he has from day one, when the FBI is investigating him?
Let's assume the FBI wasn't investigating him. And let's assume the FBI was doing bad things. The way to settle it is internally, first fix it, then announce you fixed it. But we're making Vladimir Putin's case here. What is everything, and I know you know this inside and out, what is Vladimir Putin's objective the last 6, 8, 10 years? It is to delegitimize the West, delegitimize them. So here you have the President of the United States of America saying that the single most important domestic law enforcement agency is not relevant, is not reasonable, is not honest, is not all those things. Putin must be sitting behind his desk in the Kremlin going, it's working, man. The rest of the world gets the message that the United States of America's chief law enforcement agency is not truthful, is not honest, is plotting against him, is a deep state. My God.
Well, You knew this was happening to a certain extent before the election.
Yes.
You know, the administration, your administration said something on October 7th. The agencies were working on it. President Trump says that if you had thought he would win, you would have been more outspoken. But you were so confident Hillary Clinton was going to win. Would you have been more forceful, spoken out more if you thought that she were going to lose?
First of all, we didn't have the information that we ultimately had in January, number one. Number two, we didn't want to play into Putin's hands of doing the very thing he was trying to do, delegitimize the honesty and the integrity of the electoral process. What would have happened if the President of the United States, Barack Obama, came out and said, you know, the FBI has information that the Trump team is colluding with the Russians to try to tip the election to Hillary Clinton? Would have been chaos. And we didn't have the data we have now. We didn't have the data we had even in January. And we did go before the election to Mitch McConnell and the Republicans and say, look, we should put out a joint statement so we don't make Russia's case for them, that we jointly are, Democrat and Republican, not making a judgment who's a bad guy, who's a good guy. We're looking at Russian interference in our election. They wouldn't do it.
Hillary Clinton and her supporters certainly are blaming it all on James Comey because the momentum was rising, and then, bam, he came out late in the game and reopened the email investigation. Do you blame James Comey? Would she have won if not for James Comey?
It's hard to make that judgment, what would have happened. But we're mixing two things now. James Comey wasn't investigating the Russians. James Comey was investigating her emails. And so I just want to make sure. I know you didn't intend to do that, but
if he had not reopened the email investigation.
A separate question, had he not reopened that investigation, look, there's no doubt that it had to hurt her. There's no way it could have helped her, that happening. Whether that was enough to make the 72,000 vote difference in the key states, it remains to be seen. But let me put it this way, it sure didn't help.
Would she have won if she were a better candidate?
Look, I think what happened was something we've never seen in American politics. The vast majority of people in and out of public life and the press thought that he had disqualified himself 15 times, you know, by the things he said about his groping women. The thing, I mean, and what I realized was, for example, the Shorenstein School up at Harvard University did a study. Only 4% of all the chatter and all the news about Hillary Clinton had to do with issues. He was looking at it in retrospect. Think about when he started losing the fight on the floor of the House and Senate on health care. What did he do? He started talking about taking a knee in a football game, you know, Kaepernick and what I mean, these distracting initiatives of his, which you think would be disqualifying for other candidates, seemed to work for him because he kept off the subject matter. We never really she never was able to get to the subject matter. For example, what are you going to do about middle-class families? How do women who are qualified to work pay $22,000 a year in Washington, D.C. for child care if they have 2 kids and still work? How do we make sure that people who have children and they're making a total of 60 grand a year can send them to college? I mean, all of the things that affect middle-class people we never got to talk about.